Before we get to all of that, there is something that I really want to make sure that we're re-upping and talking about, because there's been so much that's happening that, sometimes these cycles move on. I think that's very much by design, or at least some people are hoping that this is the case. But I wanted to talk about this abortion decision because it still really fucking matters. We've seen just an absolutely pathetic display since this decision by SCOTUS from the Democratic Party. They knew this was coming, man. They knew that this decision was coming when it was leaked, and they knew that this was a threat for 50 years. Think about all of those cycles since then where Democrats have had a majority and the ability to codify Roe v. Wade, and they didn't. They didn't. It's truly, truly despicable. And what are they doing right now? Yeah, they're playing for the midterms, hoping that they're going to get people who will show up for this beleaguered administration. If we could up this real quick, here's Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States.
What do you say to Democratic voters who argue, wait a minute, we worked...
We can play, but I would just say one of the most powerful people in this society, this is what her answer is when she's asked if they're going to do anything about it.
What do you say to Democratic voters who argue, wait a minute, we worked really hard to elect a Democratic president and vice president, Democratic-led House, a Democratic-led Senate. Do it now.
But do what now? What now? I mean, listen, what we did, we extended the child tax credit for the first year.
Well, I'm sorry, when I say do what, do it now. Act legislatively to make abortion rights legal.
We feel the same way. Do it now. Congress needs to do it now in terms of permanently putting in place a clear indication that it is the law of the land that women have the ability and the right to make decisions about their reproductive care, and the government does not have the right to make those decisions for a woman.
So we played the full clip there just so no one accuses us of, picking out one soundbite out of context. Her first reaction there is, do what now? And we're going to talk about all the things that they could be doing. With the second bit, when she's just throwing this ball towards Congress, it's so ridiculous when that party, and in the American political system, the sitting president is the leader of that party. And when that president is refusing to enforce that the members of the Democratic coalition stand up and vote, not just to codify Roe v. Wade, but also to abolish the filibuster, it's ridiculous to sit here and act like, oh, well, we're saying, we want them to do something. You have the power and the ability to force this into action, and you're doing nothing. Actually, though, it's not fair to say that they're doing nothing. We know there's one thing that they are doing, and it's something that they're very, very good at doing. And if you could put this up right quick, Matt, and that is fundraising. Now, we could have picked a whole host of examples of this, but I think that this one truly represents the kind of mindset of the Democratic Party. And I don't know if you can read that better than me, Matt, but it might be helpful.
Yeah, this is from Nancy Pelosi's political action pack. I asked you Monday, I asked you Tuesday, I asked you Wednesday, I asked you Thursday. I'm truly sorry to ask you again today. My team just informed me we failed to meet yesterday's first end-of-quarter deadline since the Supreme Court's ruling. I won't sugarcoat this. If I don't reach 1,387 more gifts before midnight to close the budget gap, it will be the single most devastating setback for Democrats' chances of winning this election and protecting women's reproductive freedoms nationwide. If you've been waiting for a moment to step up with $15, this is it. Can I count on you? And then just the actual text of that. That's all the fucking, I don't know what that, underneath that it says, I just received an emergency phone call that made my heart drop. I mean, it's fucking, what is this creative writing for Democratic fundraising emails? And we should also put up where Pelosi is today, as David Adler of Progressive International points out. In the Palio, which is a place where they have extreme horse racing in Italy. So...
I mean, it's a complete joke that this moment that, again, not only they knew was coming, but it's something that has been a key tool in their toolbox, right? When it comes to getting people aligned, saying, if you don't show up and support us, they're going to take away your right to abortion. If you don't show up and support us, we're going to see human rights curtailed in this country. We're seeing that happen. We've been seeing that happen for decades and generations now. right? And the only response that we're really getting from them is this big push for fundraising. And also, I'm sorry, not to do too much like CNN style political analysis, but can you imagine a weaker position to take right there? You're like, I just got a scary phone call. I've been asking you for money. I've been asking you for money. Right? This is not something that projects power. This is not something that projects the ability or the capability to do something on this, and which is what we need, right? We need to have strong leaders in a moment like this to overcome years and years of deference to the anti-democratic institution that is the Supreme Court, years and years of plans from the right wing to destroy these basic human rights that were won in this country, right? You need to be projecting strength right here, and we get this kind of whiny nonsense from them.
Yeah, I mean, and to go back to Kamala, like the thing she said later in that interview, Perino, I think that was Dana Perino, asked her, "What about opening clinics on federal land?" And we're going to take that off. That's not on the table right now.
Jesus
that's not
Christ.
something we're looking at. And it's like, and they laterally had Javier Becerra come on and say, okay, we are thinking of that in the most tepid, we don't believe you kind of way possible. But that's just a basic, like, even if you think like the Supreme Court will immediately strike that down, and like you have to put that on the table. It has to be a threat. Even if, like, let's say the most generous is you think the Supreme Court's going to strike that down and it's going to create an even worse anti-abortion precedent. Like that, I don't buy that act. But then you still keep it on the table as a threat. Like, we are going to get this done. And the other thing is people point out she can't say abortion, and we're so fucked.
I'm so tired of that.
We're so fucked because we have to say that women have the right to privacy to make a choice about their health care. And it's like, no, they need a right to health care, a part of which is abortion is part of that, right? End of story. Like that, and because we have to do this end around, because these fucking Democrats also don't want to do Medicare for all and extend it, like make that a right, because healthcare, we have to go through the right to privacy. And I'm rambling now, but it's why we're up Schitt's Creek.
No, and I mean, totally. I mean, we've been talking about this. I've been talking about the Supreme Court and particularly the threat that it poses, not just to our democracy, but very clearly to women's rights in this country for a long while, because not only is the language that we get from the Democratic Party, not adequate on this question, but two, if you just need to go up there and say, no, this is a very clear right, a right to an abortion, right? All of this kind of fixation on the right to privacy, like that's the most conservative way to codify that right in the first place, right? That Roe v. Wade is, we need to give people medical privacy, right? Again, if that's like the deal we have to make to have that exist in the country, I'll take it. But it's just like, it's not even a gold standard, and they should have been putting forward very clear language, not this, right to privacy. No, very clear, explicit, you have a right to an abortion, right? And on top of this, just what you're saying, we're going to talk about the, opening up clinics on federally controlled buildings in a second. But just also remember that, we're afraid that it's going to get struck down by the court. One, they don't have enforcement mechanisms. You got to remember that power exists in different parts of the government. And two, the fucking Republicans have been doing this for years. The states now where you can't get an abortion are states that passed laws that were very clearly against the Roe v. Wade decision. And they did it anyway because they knew that they would give them the opportunity and the ability, one, to intimidate and threaten people. And also, in a moment like this, to be able to roll back the clock in a moment, right? You have to have the fucking courage to do this. It's absurd. It's not an excuse that anyone should take seriously. But before we get into it, because I mean, unless you had something about it.
I just wanted to say real quick, I'm glad you said that about the enforcement mechanism. Like, push this to a constitutional crisis. Mm-hmm. The constitutional crises aren't things to be avoided at all costs. Our Constitution is a fucking crisis. If anything is a moment to have a crisis about it, it's this shit right now. Like, and so that's a great point.
Well, let's just say, Matt, for a second, we'll do a little thought experiment, Sam Harris style, right? Now, you and I are wrong, and no, what we really do need to be doing is just funding the Democratic Party's war chest. Well, look at this ad, Matt. You haven't seen this yet. This is courtesy of our friends at The Lever. Look at this ad that the DNC just dropped. They're going to put. Remember, this is their gamut. They're going to let people not have the right to health care in this country, right? Because they think that it's going to help Joe Biden in the fucking midterms, right? And this is their play. Just watch this for a second.
We may well be on the verge of an era when the Supreme Court sends Roe versus Wade to the ash heap of history where it belongs.
There are concerns about a possible national abortion ban from Republicans.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says a national ban on abortion is possible.
McConnell and McCarthy have been clear that if they have the chance, that they will pass a nationwide ban.
Weak sauce. I'm sorry, you could very easily watch that. Yeah, go ahead.
Already moving on to the next loss, right? Like not like we're going to fight for this back in the states that have just lost it. It's, oh, we got to fundraise for everybody else. Like, I mean, those people are lost. Leave them behind. You know, you got to save yourself, folks, and that's why you got to. I mean, that's despicable. Really, I mean, it's not surprising, of course. Yeah.
You could also watch that ad and get the impression that they haven't taken that right away, which is bullshit.
Yeah.
Because in Alabama, in Arkansas, in Missouri, in Oklahoma, in South Dakota, in Texas, in Wisconsin, and West Virginia, abortion is prohibited. In Arizona, Kentucky, Louisiana, and Utah, they had abortion bans that were blocked by the courts, but boy, attempts are underway to re-up that. And in Ohio, South Carolina, Florida, and Georgia, they have enacted new restrictions that limit access to abortions, right? It's political malpractice to put out an ad like that and make it seem like, oh, this is something that's coming, instead of something that's already fucking here, right? And that's the game. That is the logic of this Democratic Party, and you cannot have hope in these people. You just cannot at this point.
No.
Now, attempts are being made, for example, here in Austin, for certain authorities to not enforce these bans, which is a good thing you can do with limited power. But certainly that's not a long-term solution. And certainly many, many more people are going to get wrapped up in this just because, you know, some localities decide that their institutions that they control aren't going to be enforcing it. Doesn't mean that the state governments and things like that won't be doing it. Abortion providers are preparing for the worst here in Texas. Whole Women's Health. They have a fundraiser right now. I put it in the chat. I'm sorry I didn't put it up front, but I'll put it in the show notes as soon as I can. They have a GoFundMe to help fund a move of their abortion clinics from Texas to New Mexico so people can drive across the border and get abortions. There are also other clinics out there that are saying, no, we're going to stay and fight, which is incredibly brave and inspiring, like the good folks at West Alabama Women's Center. There's also a link for people to find ways to donate there as well. Highly suggest that you do that and not fucking send any more money to Nancy Pelosi in a moment like this.
And let me just add to that, Red River Women's Clinic at redriverwomensclinic.com is the one abortion clinic in North Dakota is having to move across the river into Moorhead, Minnesota. They need to raise $1 million. They were at $750,000 last I checked. So redriverwomensclinic.com for that.
These are bad times. We're getting incompetence from those people at the top. Plus, I'm not going to make this the focus of this, but the goddamn New York Times, who they set the cultural debate in this country, decided right now is a good time to put up an opinion piece conflating the far-right movement to take away women's basic rights with the movement for the protection, safety, and dignity for trans people in this country. It's just an absolute joke and a disgusting display that we're seeing right now. But this incompetence, and here's where we're going to go and make a transition here, and I think it's an important one, in the style of what we learned from working with Michael for all these years, from moving past critique into politics. Because this incompetence is creating cracks, and we need to figure out how to utilize these cracks to win. Now, I'm sure people have seen Deborah Messing, Will and Grace actress. You probably know her mainly from her horrible attacks on Bernie Sanders, who was Deborah was on a call with the Biden administration recently, where she said, "quote," where the report from the call says, Messing questioned why she was being asked to do anything, and that there did not seem to be a point to voting during the call, right? Which, I mean, there is something rich here. Where somebody who spent years attacking the progressive movement, attacking Bernie Sanders because they didn't take the right to women's health care seriously, that they didn't take, that they were misogynists or anti-women, all this kind of stuff, spent all of this time attacking that movement, now got what they wanted, and are seeing how disappointing that is in reality. So yeah, like, screw Messing. She got what she wanted. I'm not interested in winning over the support of rich folks because they're always going to oppose us. And we could point out the hypocrisy for all those people who attacked Bernie and the movement about not caring about things like women's rights, abortion, LGBT rights, in light of the fact that it's their side are the ones that are allowing all this to be done today. But we really got to be able to go beyond that, because this signals a break because of all the winnable people who bought that lie from people like Messing, who bought that lie from people like Kamala Harris, from people like Joe Biden, and go down a whole list here. That what we need right now is this pragmatic, sleepy politics to win. They're now seeing, all those people who bought that are seeing that this provides no security and has no commitment to fight. It doesn't matter how many Democrats they have in high places. So with that being noted, right, noting that, like, yes, own the libs, they're stupid, they've made a huge mistake. I'm not going to tell anybody not to dunk on them, right, because a lot of these people deserve it. But we need to be serious about the threat here. And I wanted to talk about 3 styles of criticism of the Democratic Party and to remind folks that it's just not enough to be right. We have to have this eye to building power because it's on us. So this first kind of criticism is what I'll call the cynical criticism. This is the criticism of the moderate, right? And this is what we're going to see from people like Messing and company. A correct criticism that Biden is not doing enough. They have lots of anger, but there's no sustainability for this because Messing will be right back out there telling people to do the same thing in November. And in fact, since the story is leaked, she's been spending a lot of time on Twitter, not to make this whole thing too online, but a lot of time on Twitter promoting, oh my God, Biden's done so much on the economy. The economy is great, which we also know is BS. She's going to be out there in November telling people to do the same thing. And she will campaign and donate against progressives time and time again. It's not surprising. That's the politics of the rich.
Hey, prove him wrong, Deborah. Prove him wrong.
Yeah, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong.
Patreon.com/left.
Not, but it's not surprising. That's the politics of the rich. And again, this movement is not about convincing rich celebrities to join up with us, right? I don't give a shit about that. I do care about the people who get caught up in that net.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Is like, it would be a very silly mistake to assume that everybody who believes that Deborah Messing or follows Deborah Messing is rich. Mm-hmm. And there's a certain thing where, like, leftists, you got to learn to, like, if you find it easier to empathize with a Trump supporter and why they support Trump, which I think is an exercise worth doing, especially if you think about the average voter and the type of messages they get from culture, you should likewise be able to run that same sort of program for folks who are just freaked out by the Republican Party, and just run to the nearest harbor. And like you got to be able to do both of those things, I think.
Yeah. So that's the cynical criticism that we're going to get from people like Messing. Number 2, this is closer to home, right? This is, sorry again to use an internet term, the black pill criticism. Another term you could use for this is something I call left pessimism. I'll put a link after the show. Sorry, I got wrapped up before. Didn't do it ahead of time, but it'll be there soon. A link to a video I did on this a couple years ago, I think for TMBS. But just briefly to help people understand what I'm talking about here. This is a kind of criticism that comes from this deep disappointment. Mark Fisher, the great theorist and writer, has this definition of depression that I think is really helpful for understanding this political tendency. He defines depression as the feeling that nothing good will ever happen again. And on reflection, nothing good has ever really happened in the first place. And man, I get it. I get where you can feel that way. But that's a feeling that we have to defeat. Not that we don't learn from mistakes, but that we don't let disappointment become an excuse for the far right and capitalists to trample all over people. This is why I always try to remind people that socialism is an inherently optimistic philosophy. It's not just critique, but the belief that out of all of this shit, that a better world is possible. And a lot of times with this kind of criticism just for criticism's sake, that doesn't try to build something else, doesn't try to look towards a better future, it really ekes in, something seeps into this that is a very, very nasty and non-leftist position, which is this kind of cynicism that becomes like an anti-human outlook. Everyone's too stupid. Mass culture has dulled the senses. Everyone's asleep. And, I'm just the one person who can see things clearly, right? But nothing's going to change for the better. The Democratic Party is fucking corrupt. They are our political enemies. But you cannot let that reality become an excuse to do nothing and to just watch the world burn. To be correct as the world burns, we've done this, man. Many generations in this country have sat there and said, the politicians are corrupt, the system is corrupt, and they just retreat into their personal lives and they're right? They're right in their politics. They're right in their criticism, but it doesn't produce anything. It doesn't produce a movement that can undo this. What happens is that people, many generations in this country, and I'm seeing it so much with the Bernie movement too, people became politicized and then they experienced defeat and destruction and the reality that we're up against a very powerful force, and they become depoliticized because of the sheer weight of the power of the opposition, of the difficulty of building up a labor movement and working class movement in this country after it's been decimated for so long. That's the kind of feeling of hopelessness that comes with defeat, and we just cannot take that as a refuge, right? It can feel really right to be critical of everything, but we need to find these cracks. We need to find these ways, and it's oversighted, but it's like the Gramsci quote, right? Pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will, right? Like you need to be able to hold two things in your body at one time, right? The system's fucked. The political organizations in this country are set up to prevent our success, right? But also that we can overcome this kind of shit. Because if you don't have that kind of optimism, then your criticism will always be, correct in the sense that nothing will change if nothing changes, right? Now before I ramble too much, let's get to this third one. Because this is something that I really learned a lot working with Michael, and I think it's very important because I was one of those guys who I had the correct analysis of society. I read my Marx and I read my Lenin and, there's no workers' party in this country. It's fucked. Maybe someday things will get bad enough and people will wake up, right? But I realized over time that is just not sufficient. You need to have an eye towards building something and to take that frustration and that anger and that disappointment that you feel and use that as fuel to overcome and destroy our enemies. So this third kind of criticism is what I call ruthless criticism with the aim of building an alternative. Because it's not just enough at this point to criticize the Democrats. Plenty of fucking tendencies criticize the Democrats, right? That's like 101. That's the first step for a lot of people. There's a lot of tendencies who criticize the Democrat for really bad reasons. There's a lot of tendencies that criticize the Democrats for correct reasons, but they don't want to do anything with that critique. It's easy. It's easy. The Democrats make it easy. When Kamala Harris, the second most powerful person in the country, with Democratic majorities in the Senate and the House, says, "What do you want us to do?" It's easy to criticize them. And we should do it. But we need to be criticized not only what they are not doing, but pointing out what can be done and what is necessary to be done. And on this, I'm going to shout out some of the things that AOC has been saying here in the past couple of weeks. It's not perfect. It's limited. But it points to actions that can be done today. And it rightfully implies that the Democrats are choosing right now to sit on their hands. I'll say this first before we get to some of these clips. On this program, this is the first time we're watching this, we are very critical of AOC. I won't trust AOC fully until she moves from just being adjacent to the socialist movement, but actually being in it, right? As y'all know, class-rooted politics, not class-focused politics. That's the way to victory. She needs to move from just standing near us at times to standing with us. I want us to build up institutions, but if in the process of building up a democratic socialist coalition in this country, we are going to run on a Democratic Party line, maybe run progressives or even socialists on that line, it can't be done in a way that conflates us with that cadaver of a party. It has to be antagonistic to leadership and this leadership structure that is uninterested in fighting for people. But all that being said, these points that she's been making are worth highlighting because there's an immediate roadmap here. AOC reaches a lot of people. You might be frustrated by that, right? But our job then is to be there to reach those people and to bring them into the fold of a politics that actually can make those things that she's talking about at times into reality. We really, really need to be looking to expand, not contract. Off the top, before we get to the clips, the most simple thing you can be doing right now is codifying the right to an abortion. This is what the plan was before Roe. Remember this, by the way. This is something that, like, when we criticize the SCOTUS and stuff, Matt, we've been making this point a lot, that sometimes people have this very flat view of American history, right? They remember some of these big decisions by the Supreme Court, and imagine like they came in a vacuum. No, they came out of huge social movements that were making this seem like it was the way that things were going. And Roe v. Wade is a very clear example of that, where it seemed like we were very close to having a national law passed that codified the right to an abortion in this country. But then Roe v. Wade came down, and Democrats sat on their hands for 5 decades. Right? But remember that these things, even like the victories, they never came just, so a bunch of smart people decided one day or, whatever, they were going to do something. No, it came because people like you and I were getting out there and saying, we're going to fucking make this happen. So the most simple thing that we could be doing right now is finishing that tradition and codifying this into law. Bernie's called for codifying this. AOC's called for codifying this. Other Democrats have called for this. They have to overcome the filibuster, which is a relic of slavery and reactionary politics. Should be an easy thing for the Democratic Party today to do, but we're seeing all this opposition even from Biden and his friends. But there are more steps that can be taken. And we just put up this first clip here, Matt. This is a very simple one. I think AOC puts it very well. Something we could do today. Done.
I'll start with the babyest of the babyest of the baby steps. Open abortion clinics on federal lands in red states right now.
Like, do that tomorrow. People need it here. People need it here in Texas. People need it in Alabama. People need it in South Dakota, right? This is something that needs to be done. And, you get these sentences, oh my God, well, if they do that, then the court is going to try to block them. Let them fucking do it and stand up to them like Lincoln did when those fucking reactionaries said that you can't free slaves in this country because that's against the Constitution. Yep. Lincoln said, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your legal advice. We're going to do this. FDR, similar. Put pressure on the court. You have to have the political will to overcome this power that is this nightmare that sits on top of liberals' heads, that they're just going to let this anti-democratic organization sit on top of society. It's an absurd way to run a fucking country, and people don't want this. I remind people of this time and time again. Look, the South's different from other parts of the country, right? But you look at the polling in Texas on abortion, and it is not the story that you think it is. When they passed that law here, the 6-week ban, it was the majority of Texans did not support that law. Remember that the GOP is continually representing a smaller and smaller sliver of society, but they have the kind of political calculus that they found ways to get these things in action. So the Democrats have all the ammunition here is what I'm saying, is that like these things are unpopular even in the South, where people think that everybody's anti-abortion. That's not the case, right? The people in power are anti-abortion for a myriad of different reasons. But remember that this is not something that's just universally popular here, right? Something that could be done tomorrow. On federal property, we're going to give people abortions. Boom. That's something that's very simple that could be done. But if we could move to this next clip here, because this is, Colbert, we know who the audience for this is, but I want people to pay close attention to what AOC says here, because I think, well, I'll talk about some of the maybe the slight criticisms I have here about some of the things that she says in this. But let's just put this up. Remember, again, all I'm saying is remember the audience, but remember this is where we get those cracks, and this is where we can build this kind of movement that we need to be building. Yeah. I mean, is this the full extent of the radical critique? That we should be abolishing the Supreme Court? No. But is this a crack here where you're seeing a bunch of people who watch Stephen Colbert every week cheering to the idea that the Supreme Court has delegitimized its power? And also AOC makes a very astute point here that we made earlier in the program as well, that their power is actually limited to the enforcement capabilities of the other branches of government, right? And there's no reason that you need to fall in line. Like, I want the language to be bolder there. I'd prefer I really don't want us to reset the court. That's one of my, it's a fear of mine that, we go through a huge political fight and we just sort of fix the court by putting a couple justices on it. No, they should not have this power to sort of overrule society like this in the first place. But again, that's important shit that's going on right there. And I think that message is exactly, where you would want any kind of sane social democratic liberal politics to be going. Again, it's not the radical socialist critique, but right there, that's a crack right there. And we should be building off of that and pointing the way there and seeing this. And so instead of just sitting back and saying, the Democrats are fucked, saying there's popular support right now for pushing back on the power of the court. We should be using that as an opportunity to build our movement and our coalition.
And like, just to Deborah Messing, like, what was the point of, if you're listening, Deborah, what was the point of electing Democrats? And it's true that, like, if you were sold and contingent on your vote was relied upon Joe Biden standing up to a reactionary Supreme Court as a fighter, you were lied to for your vote. And like, that was because it was never going to happen, sadly. Like, and Bernie, I think maybe could have tried, but to be honest, like, he would have had a very uphill battle in himself. But like, the important thing is, like, what it does give us the opportunity with them in power to show, like AOC is doing, like you say, what can be done instead of sitting on hands. And that is an extremely important lesson for like a Colbert audience to, instead of, being rehearsed on the latest Russiagate stuff, to be applauding the that the Supreme Court is illegitimate. Is, like you said, it's not the I don't care about the co-equal branches. I think we should have a unicameral Congress parliamentary system, right? But that's just me. But that is extremely important to, like, at least be nudging that part along. Like you said, like, we talked about this before. It's like when you get baseball players, you could just try to get everyone that's going to hit a home run and be Lenin or something, right? That's great. At a certain point, it's just nice to have the, like, social democrats getting their base hits that they need to be doing, and that's very valuable at a time where everyone else is just utterly failing in, like, kind of predictable ways. Because think about the alternative. Think about if, like, the Republicans were in control, or even if they had control of the Senate, then the Democrats, this fundraising stuff, the lie to it wouldn't be as exposed. Mm-hmm. It just wouldn't be. They'd be hiding behind, shucks, we could have, if we would have won those 2 Georgia seats, then we could have just done something, but you guys didn't vote for us hard enough. So, like, it's ironic, but, like, if you think the Democrats are a false opposition or a fake one, then you don't want them in opposition.
Yeah. Well, why does this matter? Has old David gone soft on the Democratic Party and AOC and those liberals? No. The mismanagement of the Democratic Party is extremely dangerous. But this is an important issue, y'all. It's an important issue of human rights, and it's a class issue. The Democratic Party seeks to stand between the left, the working class, and power, and maintain that power for the rich and the elite in this country. But what's happening right now is there is anger, there is outrage, and what we need to be trying to figure out is, where will that go? Because if that anger goes towards the Democratic establishment, it will lead to more damage, more defeat, and more disillusionment. We have to be out there with the solutions, standing on our own 2 feet, apart from that dangerous party, and show people that there is a real, achievable alternative. And we will have to build that, and we have to deliver that. Yeah. I mean,
sorry.
This is the moment that we're in. And I think that trying to take those 3 kinds of criticisms, right? Thinking about those different versions of it, right? The cynical bullshit that we're going to get from pundits. I mean, I'm sure, like, people are going to, like, you're going to get people who typically write praise articles about Biden and be like, being a little bit critical of him for a very short period of time. That's the cynical criticism. Throw that away. We can't become cynics. We cannot become cynics. We have to be ruthless in our criticism, but always with an eye, how can we build up this movement? Because the fact is that just being right, we've been right for 200 years. People on the left have existed before that, but I'm just saying, from, like, the Marxist socialist position, that has been the correct analysis of society for a long time. We need to build off of that analysis with an eye to build power, because just sitting outside of society, outside of politics, outside of movements with the correct critique is just not going to get us to where we need to be. Things are going to get much, much worse. And we need to figure out how to do that dance of engaging with people where they're at, but also not leaving the ruthlessness of our critique, the seriousness of our disgust at these institutions and organizations, right? Like, that's the challenge that we have as the left right now. And yeah, it falls on us, and it's not fair that it falls on us, right? But you know what? You got to fucking buck up, and you got to show up and fight, and we have to